if we're looking at the globe and we're looking for young people who are going to constitute the workforce in the future, next decade and a half, Africa is going to have the biggest workforce in the world. Africa is going to have the biggest young population in the world. Africa is going to have a growing middle class, which means it's going to be a huge market for consumption, both for African-produced goods, but also for foreign-produced goods as well. 60% of agricultural land in the world is now on the African continent, that land that you could actually use. So if you take a longer-term view, 15, 20 years, Africa is the future.
But before the world comes to us, because of all these amazing opportunities and the demographic dividend that you speak of that we offer, we as Africans ourselves need to start trading with each other. Why isn't that happening despite us talking about it for so many years?
To a great extent, Africa is a victim of its own colonial past. So our logistics systems haven't been developed. I think many today will look in the mirror and say not all of us can have an airline, not all of us can have a stock exchange, a process of bargaining, if you like, and negotiations needs to happen so that we can build new roads, build new railways, make our ports more effective, create freight logistics that will help us to get goods from one end of Africa to the other. There's a lot of talking. I think there's some happening in this direction. Again, if we take a 5 or 10 year view, we'll see the logistics improving, therefore trade will improve. But also, each of us needs to ask, what are we good at? What can we produce that others want? And can we produce it at the quality and the price that others in Africa want as well? Because today, Africa is acting as a magnet for the rest of the world as well. And so if we want to trade amongst ourselves, it's very important that we ask ourselves some tough questions, but learn both to compete and also, more importantly, to cooperate with one another to create this dynamic.
Back in South Africa, I mean, one of the things you mentioned today is that everyone needs to play their role in terms of creating jobs and reducing inequality. You said, in a sense, that the private sector has not fully come to the party. Why do you think they've been slow to buy in?
Well, that's been a general phenomenon across the globe, that as soon as the Great Recession came along, the private sector tends to retreat. It tends to become more risk-averse. The financial sector of the private sector becomes even more risk-averse. So lending of money, access to capital seems to become a lot more difficult, but we have a kind of wait-and-see game. Let me see if Europe settles. Let me see if Greece really leaves the euro. Let me see if the European currency collapses because some countries want to leave. And that then begins to feed into a negative narrative. And what we want, and it's during this period that government, generally speaking, but certainly the South African government, has increased its debt, invested a lot more in infrastructure, and basically kept the economy alive. As we go into the next 5 years, it's important that the private sector increases its investment. In the South African context, they're a much bigger part of our economy, and finds new areas of innovation, new areas of growth, which government will, of course, support. And that will then give us greater opportunities to create real jobs and what I call decent jobs in the real economy of our country.
We were, in a sense, pitching the National Development Plan today. Jabu Mamuza, the head of BUSA, saying that we must stop this endless and needless debates about it and we must adopt it as our economic constitution. What is it about the NDP to you that should be seen as such?
Well, look, unlike many parts of the world, we can say the kind of South Africa Mr. Mandela left us with, it creates a fantastic foundation to build on. So what are we going to do for the next 20 years? And what the NDP says is recognize both the huge progress we've made, but also some of the difficulties that we face. So you have an energy constraint in South Africa. So whether it's another coal-powered station or any other source of power, renewables, let's get that going, and we are getting that going. Second, we have logistics constraints. Whether it is to get minerals to beneficiation points or minerals to export points, improve port logistics and rail logistics so that we can actually do better. Thirdly, skills development and our education system and health system more generally. Now, for each of these, we have plans, we have clear objectives. The ANC in its manifesto more recently published says also these are our focus areas: education, health, job creation, inclusive growth, and build on the platform that we actually have. So there will always be tactical differences. We think you should take this road rather than that road, but the message from the President and certainly from government more generally is, can we move? And as we move, we'll meet with success, but we'll also meet with challenges, and we'll resolve those challenges as we go forward.
But at the end of the day, and at the core of our economy remains mining. And we've seen disruptions to production, the threat of further strike action this week. What is the latest on that front? You said everything has been done to try and avert that.
But again, the President, the Deputy President, my colleagues, Minister Shabangu and Minister Oliphant, have been involved in very intensive discussions with Labour, with the Chamber of Mines. But what is all this about? It's about saying mining is an important sector. Exports of minerals is also an important part of our overall current account deficit that we are confronted about. And we need stability in that sector. So find non-contentious ways of resolving our conflicts and sit around the table, which is a South African way of resolving conflicts, and if at all possible, avoid strikes, avoid any kind of violence, and start sending positive messages to the world.
Know more about your world.
ENCA.com